Super. Thank you for watching that and for staying with us. It's great to have your company still. We've got two more brilliant sessions coming. The first of which is going to be hosted by my friend and my colleague, Chris Nash, as I mentioned. Chris, over to you to introduce our brilliant guests.
Fantastic, Andrew, and thank you so much. What an enlightening conversation with Dave. What an absolutely stunning head teacher, and
fascinating.
So amazing to see and refreshing to hear his approach to education. I think the thing that struck me most was the consistent theme around embracing change, always doing things differently, coming outside of your comfort zone. And those that know me, including you, Andrew, know that my favourite phrase is always about moving forwards, constantly moving forwards. Moving on to the next thing, not looking back, not dwelling on things in the past, trying to make things better all the time.
Absolutely. So, yep, amen to that.
So I'm delighted. We're going to be in conversation now with two incredibly talented teachers. Shortly I'll be introducing Catherine and Beth, who are going to be talking about their experiences during the last year of remote learning and the pandemic. I've chosen two very contrasting teachers. They're contrasting locations in the country. One from up north, one from down south, and from two very contrasting establishments as well. We have a very large special school in Salford and also a large academy trust, 5-school academy trust down in Devon. So I hope they provide a very rich and broad view of their experiences. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Catherine Garratt. Catherine is a teacher at Springwood Primary School in Salford, Greater Manchester. They're a 300-place primary school which serves the whole of the city of Salford and provides specialist education for pupils aged 2 to 11, all of whom have complex additional needs. Her usual role is as team leader, communication lead and specialist advisory outreach teacher, and during the pandemic she has been coordinating home learning. I'm also delighted to introduce to you Beth Schoter. Beth is a primary teacher from Devon who helps lead the digital strategy for the Multi-Academy Trust, the Cornerstones Academy Trust, where she works. She's an accredited STEM facilitator and Microsoft innovative educator expert, which enable her to offer regular professional development to the other educators around best practice in educational technology. Welcome to both of you. Really delighted to have you here today. And thank you for taking your time out from your incredibly busy schedule to share your thoughts with us and all of the teachers who have joined us today. What an incredibly challenging year. What incredibly complex roles you've both taken on board. And I can't imagine how much you must be looking forward to the half-term holiday in just a couple of days' time. Catherine, did you want to say anything more about your school, anything more about your your particular makeup of your pupils and students and teachers, etc.?
I don't know, don't think so. Yes, we are a large primary special school. We are based over 2 sites now, and our pupils have a wide range of needs. So I think a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is the bespoke aspect of what we've been doing.
Fantastic, thank you, Catherine. And Beth, any particular things you'd like to share about your particular setup and your schools down in Devon?
So I think what's quite relevant to today's session is the fact that we are also an EdTech demonstrator school. So we've been sort of, I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but I guess leading the way of developing best practices in virtual school initially back in March, and now blended hybrid learning approaches now, because we have always been very passionate about technology for education. And I really liked what you were saying just a minute ago, Chris, when you were sort of saying about that sort of commitment to change and not being reluctant to move with the world, which is moving whether we move with it or not, and just making sure that we don't stay stagnant. So we've always been very passionate in sort of pioneering those changes in technology with education. So we were quite fortunate in being in a position to set up our virtual school very early on and make a lot of our own mistakes, which we can then support other schools in avoiding.
That's quite a reassuring position to be in, to almost be sanctioned with the ability to make mistakes so that you can share those out with others. That's a very, very powerful position. And I guess while we're on the subject of that change across the year. And clearly there's been a significant shift in the understanding of what blended and remote learning means from the last national lockdown last March to the one we're currently experiencing. Certainly in the conversation that I'm having, it's very much more about the productivity on a day-to-day basis than trying to understand what on earth am I going to be doing tomorrow. How has that changed for you? What have been, I guess, what have been the biggest challenges, and what does blended learning mean to you now compared to what it did a year ago? Catherine.
So for Springwood, I feel that really the blended learning for our children is that bespoke for our pupils. It's that bespoke learning that's needed, because of all the children have got their own very individual needs, and that one size fits all approach really doesn't work, I suppose for any child, but specifically for our children. And I think our challenge has been for how to harness those individual needs and manage their learning and manage their home learning while still a majority of our pupils are still in school. So we've still got that workload, but for the pupils who are at home, you know, getting that bespoke, getting that individual learning out to them, and facilitating that. Again, for our pupils, and I'm sure for many teachers and parents, I think that one of the biggest challenges has been the situation specific learning, and by that I mean a lot of our pupils will present differently in school and at home. Things that they would accept doing in school, they might not accept doing at home, and vice versa, very much so. Work belongs at school. Don't try and present me with work at home, because that doesn't belong here. And that's a challenge. And fitting in very much with what you were saying earlier and what Dave was saying, that's what is learning. It's not just your standard things that you're asking them to do. For some of our children, it is just that, actually, yes, engaging with interaction, which is important. It's just that challenge and digging down of what is the without actually being with the children, what is it that they're going to accept doing at home. And we're very much here to support the families, not to make their lives any harder. This situation is hard enough for everybody, so we're trying to support. And so to do that, we, as well as presenting learning, we need to present learning that's going to be manageable and accepted.
And those parents are absolutely a key stakeholder in that whole relationship. You have to win over the parents very much to enable the children to be able to learn properly and appropriately and in a seamless way. I think for you, Beth, obviously you mentioned that you were very much kick-started at the beginning of the year anyway. From what I know from the school, you've been developing your digital prowess for years. This is not something new to you. So I think you were quite ready to flip the switch when blended learning came along. How has there been a shift from what you experienced last March to now for you?
I think initially, back in the first instance of virtual school, there was very little sort of, none initially for us to, so shared experiences from colleagues to all draw upon. Whereas now there are so many communities of educators that can offer best practice, support, a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear. So that definitely feels a lot different. And I think our interpretation of what is possible is massively different. I think, again, as I said previously, the world of EdTech, even with education out of the equation, it's it's one of the biggest growing industries. People refer to it as sort of, you know, the next industrial revolution. It's massive and it's changing all the time. I read recently, if you do a computer science degree now, by the time you've completed your 3-year degree, much of what you learn in that first year is then redundant because everything is changing so often. And if we bring that back to education, we are educators and we have a responsibility to keep up with that. And the demand for face-to-face learning and online learning won't cease to exist and shouldn't cease to exist when the pandemic is over. I can think of at least 5 to 10 examples where, you know, between last March and now, I've had children in my class at home accessing that virtual learning with no connection to COVID as to why they are at home. I had a child who was at home post-op, recovering for 2 weeks, able to continue learning. I had a child at home because they had an unwell single parent who was unable to bring them into school. So that demand for accessing learning from home, you know, it will be much fewer and far between, we would like to think. But if we as educators are comfortable and in the routine of being able to make that available for children at home, that's, as I say, not something we should stop. But in terms of our challenges, I think, again, from being fortunate enough to talk with lots of head teachers and lots of teachers about their own contexts and working with a huge range of school settings, there's 2 or 3 things that really stand out as common barriers. First, obviously, goes without saying, technology, access to physical hardware, devices. You know, we all understand that one. We can't assume the devices that parents have at home. There are families where you might have a nuclear family with all 4 working from home, all 4 needing a device, sharing one. So, I mean, there are a few little tips and tricks with that, tips and tricks with that in terms of being able to access devices for vulnerable children from the government, adapting resources to suit the needs of the family, perhaps, you know, printing certain things for certain families that, you know, would have 0 access, and just making sure you're prioritizing your most needy children, your most vulnerable children. So tech, that's all I can really say about that. I wish I could, you know, fix that problem for everyone, but unfortunately devices is something that is tricky and you have to take it case by case and adapt what you're doing to make it more accessible. Another one that's really common is people wanting to ensure well-being. Mental health is well looked after for staff, parents, children, everybody, the world. And the last one is engagement, I think, and that's not just, again, students, that's with parents as well. It's in a primary context, you're putting a lot of ownership on the parents to engage those children and allow those children to ideally work autonomously further down the line, but initially there is a lot of ownership put on the parent. So yeah, I think engagement is another tricky thing too.
Yeah.
I envy the insight of those teachers who are also parents of young children who had to go through both sides of scenarios. Obviously, we've got lots of parents at work who have to juggle between, you know, developing new content and managing the homework and managing the schoolwork. Equally, you know, we've got those that are very well skilled and very well trained and able to provide the support. But I think my favourite phrase that was used at the beginning of the year, and very much to what you were saying, Beth, is that it's almost like the notion of EdTech has gone. It's ed.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how we do education. We use technology because it's central to what we need to do, and it's central to actually all the levelling up that we've talked about. If you want to level up, you need to enable children to be able to access the learning wherever they are. If they're at home, if they're in hospital, if they're in a hospital school, if they're in a remote environment, if for whatever reason, we need to be able to use the technology that's out there to provide that access. And that's really critical, but it's not just about the access to the technology, is it? Of course, you know, one of the key things, and I'm sure every teacher has experienced this, is the motivation. How to ensure that those pupils are engaged, how to ensure that they're turning on the camera every morning, they're staying present till the end of the lesson, they are being there for their learning, and they are engaging with their learning. What have been the key things that you think you brought into your lessons that have kept that engagement going there?
I think with regards to keeping children motivated, you want to, first of all, keep the learning engaging in terms of the actual content of the lessons. I think initially where schools wanted to ensure that, you know, there was content available for children, it wouldn't necessarily reflect the depth content of the lessons that we would deliver face to face with children at school. And I think being able to help teachers recognize that they don't need to put a ceiling on what they deem possible to make accessible to children from home, that has a huge impact on motivation. And you almost need to up the ante with that, with blended learning, and make it even more motivational than before, because like we've spoken about, it's very difficult for children to make the transition to seeing their home environment as a work environment. And I know you spoke about that, Catherine, but the same goes for the children in our school. It's a real struggle. And I think the way children see their parents and the way children view their teachers are very different. We have children that are good as gold, maybe even a bit of a wallflower, who, you know, we have parents emailing saying, you know, I'm pulling my hair out, they're absolutely refusing to engage, you know, it's causing massive upset in the family. So yeah, I do think keeping your lessons engaging and trying to mirror the quality that you would work with in schools is really important. And drawing upon tools for curriculum delivery, like discovery education, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to recreate resources that have been created by professionals, by teachers, for teachers. Children love being on curriculum support sites like Discovery Education. If you tell children that they're about to go on that for a lesson, whoops, cheers, smiles, and you know, there's quizzes, videos, activities. I find it really useful for explaining more abstract concepts in maths or in science, when you sometimes really understand something as an adult, but you think, well, how am I going to put that in a way that's digestible for a child? So definitely making use of those tools that you have available to you, you know, that whole idea of working smart, not hard, although not to imply that teachers don't work hard, of course.
But no, you're absolutely right. Working smart is the way to do it. Catherine, having spent nearly 15 years in SEN, I think the one thing that I understood most of all in all of that time is every single one of those children in front of me wanted to learn. They wanted to learn. The trick was wanting them to be in school, having had some very often difficult experiences in mainstream, some very challenging times, many of them completely switched off. I wouldn't say learning, because that's not true at all, but certainly switched off school, certainly switched off the notion of a teacher and what they might represent to them. But over those 14 years, I realised central to all of that was that notion of that relationship, of engaging with that child so that they literally were chomping at the bit to get out to the door in the morning. I think my most proud moment was a parent letting me know that even on the days when she's sick and really, you know, just absolutely struggling to get up, Stacey's still there in the morning, waiting for the bus to come with a big smile on her face and wanting to turn up for the class. What have been the challenges flipping that into a remote learning situation?
Numerous. It's going back to that personalised learning again, and knowing the children. Now we have a home learning team now, but we don't know all. We're not necessarily the class teachers for the children who are working from home, but it's that making sure we go and find out all the details about the children from the class team, and oh, they're not quite liking this, what can we do? Oh, they really like such and such superhero, and so you then make resources with that superhero in them, and then yes, those resources are then well received. It's harnessing, like I was saying before, those individual hooks to learning, really, that when it works, the feedback we're getting from parents is, oh yes, that he or she has loved that work, and you know, please send more like that. We've got children working on so many different pathways for their education, and that's been the challenge as well. That so we have some pupils who are working very much on a sensory curriculum, And so each week for them, we share a range of activities with the parents, and we do that through Discovery Education now. We put them all on the one board, but they're ideas that the parents can then undertake with the children to encourage that interaction, to encourage that communication, and then as and when tying in with the children's IEPs as well and keeping those going, but very much through a sensory base.
I think you shared a couple of those resources with me, didn't you, Catherine? Shall I bring them up
on
the screen and you can
some of our pupils are working on online resources, and we've used this Espresso, I think, since it started, and we've recently gone over to the Discovery Education experience and started using these discovery boards, and they're brilliant. You know, they're quite quick to do. So this is an early theme. So the flowers are our early years department team, and so we were able in this way to make that collage of activities. Some of those are from Espresso, brilliant. As you can see, that some of them are there's a YouTube clip, an iPlayer clip, a song. So it's not all from Espresso, but it gives us that platform to share everything in a meaningful way, and a clear way with the children and parents. And the children can click on and watch things more than once if they want to. And it is interactive. It's not printing anything out, which, you know, as Beth said, it can be problematic for a lot of families. And then down at the bottom, there's those examples of sensory activities to do as well. So we're pleased with that, and the feedback we're getting from parents of the online work that we're presenting has been very positive so far. Oh yes, and this was the first board I made when I was learning how to use the studio boards, and we use a program called Board Maker, so I was able to simulate as we would do the writing, and then just clip it and import it as a picture. I hadn't learned how to do backgrounds then, so it looks very bland, I'm afraid. But again, it brings everything together.
Absolutely wonderful start, Catherine. That's fabulous. Okay, so I think, you know, but there's been a lot of touch points on mental health and well-being as we go through, and absolutely, I think one of the most important things that we do bring forward is that re-recognition, because we used to have it, of the whole child. And what we're supposed to be doing for the whole child in the classroom, and how many of those parts of the whole child are equally as important as the maths and the language and developing all those. So some of them may never go to full literacy and full numeracy. They may always be restricted, but we need to still move them forward and engage with them to provide them with, I guess most importantly, this skill of self-regulation. You know, this notion of the child being resilient, of them being able to ask for support, knowing where to get the support, knowing how to ask for help, and I'm sure that's been incredibly challenging during lockdown, trying to work out ways to bring these systems to bear when you're used to the child just coming up and grabbing your hand before they go out to break. Do you mind have a quick word, miss, or something like that? You know, how have you managed to bring in systems where students and pupils can get the support that they need? How do you get that balance between, I guess what I'm saying, where, you know, typical nervous teacher will do the thing that a typical nervous teacher does and talk all the way through a lesson, you know, because they're not fully confident in what they're doing, so they'll just talk their way through it. And I'm assuming that when lockdown lessons started, there was a tendency to do a lot of that as well and talk your way through the lesson. What things have you brought in that have changed that have allowed to break up the lesson, allowed pupils to work independently, get support from their peers, get support from you and each other and their parents? To Beth, sorry.
So number one thing that I'm very passionate about, you know, supporting other people to achieve is live lessons. And what's brilliant is the fact that these aren't as feared as they have been for sort of the last 6 months before we had these January school closures, where everyone has sort of been forced into them now, or sort of since October, since it became a legal requirement to get provision out to children who are working at home. And live lessons end up saving you so much headache and so much time, where, you know, if I'm creating a pre-recorded lesson, I will write myself, you know, perhaps depending on the subject, depending on my confidence, might write myself a little script, some notes. I might have a go at recording it, you know, oh, I'm not happy with that, I'm going to record that again. And you end up doing 3 times the work in 3 times the amount of time. Whereas if you hit the ground running with a live lesson, it does feel much scarier initially. And what fills me with dread is the idea of all the parents at home watching and judging, and I spelt the Loch Ness Monster wrong in a lesson the other day, so that's fantastic for all of my parents to see. That's a very easy to spell word. But aside from all of those fears, I think, yeah, teachers don't need help identifying what makes a good lesson. We wouldn't be teachers if we couldn't. And all the elements that make a good lesson, a good effective lesson, come intuitively to teachers. It's not a job you can do if you're not passionate about doing it properly. Nobody wants to be a teacher to do it by halves. You know, it's a very all or nothing career. I think what teachers just need help with is, like you say, knowing the right tools with regards to EdTech in the current climate, to be able to translate those things that we know make a good lesson into a blended learning context. Something I know that works really well, something I've observed that works really well in an online learning environment with regards to that self-regulation is, as you've sort of touched upon, having regular opportunities for interaction. There are a lot of communication tools available. Another really good one is Slido, which was designed initially for adults in meetings, but it's real-time communication, real-time feedback that can be projected onto a screen to allow that interaction during an input, or, you know, ideally having a platform like Zoom, like Microsoft Teams, that does allow children to remotely interject with their own contributions verbally or in the chat, whether that's peer on peer, whether that's peer to teacher. I think with primary school children, it's really important to give them little nudges and to encourage them. They can find it very daunting talking to a screen. One little thing we've done actually that has had a really positive effect is setting up what we've called playground chats. Because I think online, us as teachers, you know, we like everything to be neat, organized, proper, done right, looking good. Whereas children almost need some time and some space to just be children and talk about absolute nonsense and all the rubbish they would on the playground. And they can't do that if we don't create a space for that. So, as I say, we've created these chats in Microsoft Teams where we've got the teachers and the support staff, and then all of the cohorts of children, well, they've got their own per year group. And it is just rubbish. It's GIFs. It's actually last Friday, one of them posted hi, and then no word of a lie, the word hi was posted in this chat, just hi, by nearly all of them. Hi, 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 and that's all it was. But they were having a great time, and just creating that space for them, as I say, to just be relaxed, to have those moments of social interaction that they would be used to having on the playground. And just one other thing that I've seen that has a really good impact on encouraging children to be self-regulating themselves is making sure that when you are communicating with children, and more in a context of reviewing work and providing feedback, it's just making sure that that's still meaningful and that still feels personalized. I know you've spoken about sort of personalized learning, Catherine, quite a lot now, and I think children working at home, a really, really important part for that to be successful is them still feeling like they are seen, and them feeling like their efforts are being recognized and acknowledged. And you know, we use assignments in Teams, and you know, now with the new experience on Discovery Education, with all of their assessment tools for children, being able to communicate with children and reference a piece of work they've done, just plucking out one piece of vocabulary, one, you know, maybe a simile, one full stops, capital letters, using their name, and just letting them know that what they are doing, even though it is in isolation, is being received and appreciated. And you know, that's really encouraging for children to know, actually, even though I'm miles away from my teacher, I'm still motivated to do this work because I know that when I submit it, my teacher is going to see that and she's going to be proud of me. And I think that really maintains the confidence to self-regulate outside of those times.
Fantastic. And Catherine, I saw lots of nods there.
Yes.
Lots of nods.
You said this, Chris, you said, oh, you'll have a lot in common despite the fact that the schools are so different. And it's just doing things in different ways, isn't it? And at different levels, I suppose. We don't have live streamed lessons because that's really, for a vast majority of our children, not how lessons work. Although saying that, we have just got a robot that is meant to live stream. We're just trialing that with one pupil, so we'll see how we get on.
A robot that live streams?
Sorry?
A robot that live streams?
Yeah, it's a AV1 robot we're trialing with, I know, for
wow.
one pupil in particular. But we try and keep in touch with the children as much as possible. Some Zoom meetings with the classes have been, for some pupils, is the right way to go. Sometimes it's a doorstep meeting at a distance, of course, you know, where you can just say hello, sign hello and say hello. And we've sent certificates out and we do a best award, and you know, the children get wristbands, you know, and things like that, and those are being delivered. And it's that, like you were saying, that connection to school. I think that's key, isn't it? That I may not be in school and doing my work, but I'm still part of school. And that's what we for both children and staff actually who aren't in. It's that connection that's so important that we're trying to keep. But for us, and again, I'm sure it's the same, it's not just the connection with the children, it's the connection with the families, because home learning doesn't happen just with the children, does it? And the families are just key, and it's making sure that it's that connected to the families, that we are there for them and we are there to support in whatever way, and what is the important learning. So we've tried to make the learning bespoke, as well as it being motivating and interesting for the children, and whether it's a physical pack going out or the online learning or a sensory pack or whichever choices then is made, we've tried to then keep it, you know, get the level of it right as well, you know, so it's not just one board that's being made. We're making boards for all the different P levels in maths and English, etc., etc. But then, and this comes over the weeks as we phone parents at least once a week, and emails go back and forth, and like I said, doorstep meetings as well sometimes. It's those conversations as the relationship builds. It's those conversations of what's working and what's not working. I'm not phoning up to say, have you done the home learning? I'm phoning up to say, how are things? You know, is the home learning working for you? And it's all right to say no, because if you say no, we can put something in place that will work. And what we found is that we may have been at the beginning focusing very much on their English targets and the maths targets and the themes and etc., etc., and mirroring that learning that would take place in school. And yes, that continues. But when the children are at home, it's that interaction that's so important as well, and it's that communication that's so important. So what we've found we're doing, that the sensory activities that were really just being allocated initially to our pre-formal learners, our very sensory learners, we're actually we're assigning those now after discussion to other families, to other children as well, to encourage that enjoyment and that play and that engagement. So like we were saying, what is important learning? Actually, that depends on where you are and where you are in yourself and your emotions, etc., etc. And it's that whole range of things that we're trying to deliver, but we can only do that through communication, can't we?
Absolutely. There were two.
No idea whether that answered your question or not.
No, completely. It absolutely does. I think there were two words that generally apply to learning, and they're both very different intents. And one is work and the other is play. And I'm sorry, as a learner, I learn by playing. I always have done. I always have done and always will do. And I come to it, hopefully, we're always with that playful attitude. Listen, the thoughts that you've shared out have been so valuable. And I know, I mean, it's exciting to hear so many similarities between both of your experiences, but also to hear your different approaches as well. I know for one that I'm going off to do a bit of research on the AV1 live streaming robot. And I'm particularly going to put something into play around playground chats, because that is absolutely fabulous. And I really want to pick your brains a little bit more about that later on. Maybe there's a whole app coming out there somewhere about a playground chat. You never know. But that sounds very, very exciting. That's fantastic. I just want to say to everyone who's watching, apologies that we've run over. It's far too important to be having this conversation than listening to me prattling on about the Discover Education platform, which I'll be doing next. So apologies that we have gone on a little bit longer than normal, but that was a conversation I really didn't want to stop. Absolutely wonderful and fascinating insights. Thank you so much to both Beth and Catherine for taking time out of your busy schedule. I so hope you're going to have a fabulous half term and just collapse. I pray the weather is good for half term, so at least we can get out and do some of those long walks that we've been all, and absolutely Dave said that at the beginning as well, didn't he? I've missed my long walks and I want to get back to them too. So thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll do another one of these sessions soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.